question for today was, which of the following was not? Which of the following was not one of the 5 main characteristics of capitalism? So let's start. What are one of the 5 main characteristics, Mercedes?
Freedom of choice.
Freedom of choice, your ability to buy whatever you want. The ability to make some money. Competition among other businesses. Private ownership of resources and property. Free enterprise. Right? It's sort of, hey, government, back off. Don't mess with the economy thing. Which means the correct answer to today's question is government regulation. Government regulation is the correct answer for today's question. All right? If you got it wrong, you got 0 points. If you got it right, you got 3 points. All right? Good stuff. Thanks for participating, everybody. So far, no, it's all or nothing. All or nothing. Now, we've talked about capitalism, right? You know capitalism because capitalism is what we have here in the United States. Are there any perfect capitalist systems? No, because if there were, there would be huge problems. For example, in a capitalist society, a pure capitalist society, if you lose your job, you would not be eligible for unemployment because a pure capitalist society would say, survival of the fittest, who cares, right? Same thing goes for like welfare. Hey, you lost your job and you're disabled, survival of the fittest, we'll see you, right? So, pure capitalism doesn't exist because we have programs like Social Security, unemployment, other social programs, which makes us technically a mixed market economy, or a combination of free enterprise and government decisions. However, think of this like 95% free enterprise, 5% government intervention. All right? So mixed market economy is what we are. And today you are going to learn why Russia is not a communist state. It's not. And I will give you a quick answer. It's never been a communist state. If you want any more reasoning than what I'm going to teach you, think about this. Russia used to be a part of a big group of countries, states, right? Anybody know what the name of that was? The USSR. The United Soviet Socialist Republic. They've always been socialist. They've never been communist. Communism is very different. So let's talk about socialism as a whole. All right? Socialism is where the government owns the basic means of production. So do you guys remember these questions? What and how something is produced? Who decides it in socialism so far? The government. All right, so the government controls the means of production and it determines the use of resources and distributes products and wages and provides social services, education, healthcare, and welfare. So how is it going to be produced? Who decides that? The government, again. And as you saw, distribute products and wages. So who gets the good is also decided by the government. So far, government, government, government is your socialism piece here. Now, some of you, hopefully, have picked up on this fact. Public education, healthcare, and welfare. All of those things are socialist ideas. Pure capitalism would say nothing should be provided by the government. If you want anything, you should have to provide it for yourself. So we do have pieces of socialism here in the United States, right? We do have the Affordable Care Act, which is a popularized social health care program. We do have public education. You're in it right now. We do have welfare system for people who need assistance, right? But the welfare system isn't exactly what you think it is either, right? So I'm sure some of you are sitting in your seats here thinking people abuse the welfare system, and that's fine. Statistically speaking, it's not correct. But if you want to believe that, awesome. But I do want to give you a little piece of information. Of the people who have reportedly abused welfare, most of them, and I would say most, it's like 82 or 84% of them are from very, very, very crime-ridden, crime-heavy areas. So statistics show that it is literally cheaper to pay the people that are abusing the welfare system their welfare checks than it is to stop giving them welfare altogether. So if we cut the welfare system and it doesn't exist at all, it's going to cost you as an American citizen more money than it does now. And all of you are sitting in your seats saying, that's a dumb thing to say. If we're not spending any money, then it costs us less, right? Incorrect. Because what is going to happen to those low-income individuals who are already susceptible to committing crimes? They're going to go to jail. And it costs you more money per day to pay to put a prisoner in jail than it does per day to pay them a welfare check. It is literally cheaper to pay welfare checks to people than to put them in jail. It is going to save you money to allow people to abuse the welfare system than it will be to get rid of it and put them in prison. But statistically speaking, people don't abuse the welfare system. It's a myth. Yeah?
What is more, welfare or unemployment?
It depends on what job you had. And I say almost every time it's going to be unemployment. But unemployment is limited. You can only draw it for 18 months in your entire life. So if you lose your job and you draw unemployment for 18 months and you have a job for 3 years and you get fired again, you don't have unemployment to draw anymore. Unemployment's only offered 18 months lifetime. Welfare, you can get for your entire life if you qualify. Yeah. Jada, let's go.
See, it's going to give them away so they don't go fit.
I definitely wouldn't call it throw a fit. I would call it enact upon the outside indicators of their culture, which says what's okay and what's not okay. For example, if you're starving, is it okay to steal food to stay alive?
Yes. No, that's not stealing things.
Sure.
Stealing so bad.
It's rather than a jail.
It's a moral question. So what I'm saying to you is, it is cheaper to pay people to be on welfare than it is to put them in the prison system. So what you're assuming is that they are criminals, even if they're collecting welfare. And what I'm telling you is, statistically speaking, receiving a welfare check keeps them from becoming criminals. But then it's wrong. So I'm not sure why I'm addressing it.
I'm saying I was going to ask something else, but I just couldn't help it too. So, like, I don't know how this sounds. Like, I don't agree with what, like, you said about, like.
Is it a question?
Yes.
No, it needs to end in a question mark, or I'm going to cut you off and keep going. Okay, go ahead.
Like, I don't understand how it's a myth because, well, I mean, like, I'm not saying it's not only a myth, but, like, okay, so like, I have one family, like, they're all completely capable of having jobs and working, and they don't live in a bad area.
You have 7 seconds to finish this question.
And why? I don't know why.
Here's the thing. You are not a part of the government. You are not a part of the judicial branch. You do not get to decide whether people are well enough to work or not. That is not up to you. It's the same thing. You do not get to determine what other people's name is or how to pronounce it, right? We had this conversation before you got here. You do not get to determine anything because that is the job of the judicial branch. So whether you think they're able enough to work doesn't matter in any way, shape, or form at all. Not even a little bit. If I could even take that a step further, it matters so little that nobody's going to care for the entire duration of existence, past my lifetime and yours, and continuing into an infinite number of lifetimes, past and present, brought together into a big ball of time that continues to multiply infinitely. No one will ever care. No, no one's going to care. Why? Because you as a citizen don't get to determine the well-being and the ability of other citizens. You get to determine your ability and your well-being. And how do I know this, that people don't abuse the welfare system? Because it is a fact. It is an objective fact that is done through research, that is done by scientists who have studied this information. But I'm sure, Jada, sitting in your chair, being 17 years old, you know more than any scientist that could have possibly studied this information.
I'm all the scientists put together. That's my dream.
Exactly. Good job. I'm proud of you for asking a question, but it's not a good one.
Thank you. I love you too.
All right. Socialism has 3 main goals. All right. Now, again, these 3 main goals are sort of distributed in a way where I'm sort of generalizing. So what I mean by that is, when I say distributing of wealth equally among all people, I know, I get that. I've said that, but that's not technically correct. They're not moving wealth. They're moving access to resources and the ability to purchase and use those resources, but it's easier for you to understand if you just think everybody gets the same stuff all the time, period, right? And that's sort of what the principle of the idea is, but not how it works in practicality. Society is controlled through its government of all major decisions about production. So again, what and how the government, right? What and how much, how it is to be produced, and who are government, 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 and socialism. Government ownership of most land, if not all land, and of factories and other means of production. So if the government doesn't own land in socialism, who owns it? Nobody, because people can't own land in socialist governments. You are not allowed to. If you say, hey, I want to buy this piece of land and build a house on it, and you live in a socialist state, too bad. You can't have it. Not allowed. Government owns it. People in socialist states, primarily Russia, that want to buy property, they lease the property from the government for 99 years. They pay that same lease payment for the entire duration of their lives, or as long as they live there. And then when they want to move out, they end the lease, somebody else buys their house, and they buy a different house. You can't own property. You are not allowed to. Right? And all of you have trouble understanding that because you have possessions in your pocket or in your bags or with you here today that you think of as yours, that nobody can take from you, right? It doesn't work like that in socialist states. You own literally nothing. Everything that exists is the property of the government. For example, and I might have mentioned this before, how many of you have driver's licenses? You don't own them.
I understand that.
You are not allowed to own your driver's license. Your driver's license is owned by the state of Ohio. Since driving is not a right that is guaranteed to you under the Constitution, it can also be taken away from you for any reason that they see fit, right? So that license is simply a record that you have the ability to drive, but it's owned by the state, not you. So you can't deface it. You can't do anything to it. You can't change it in any way because it is not yours to change in the first place. Tiffany.
So it's like the government owns you and like everything.
I didn't say they owned you. I say they owned everything that you think you own.
So like, then why do the cops work through the government? So why do they need like a warrant to go through your house and stuff? You don't actually.
We're not a socialist state. So this is not American things. So do police officers need a warrant for things in the United States? Absolutely, they do. But the government doesn't own everything because we're a capitalist system. So it would be a different question, okay? So since we're not socialist, that's why, because we're not socialist. The government doesn't own it. All right? Democratic socialism is a thing. All right? You're writing on paper. That's your fault. All right? Democratic socialism. If you're going to write on paper, you better make it work. All right? JD, you have to put your phone down. You can either have your notes or your phone. You get one or the other. Cool. Take notes on your phone.
I'm just kidding. I don't like taking it.
All right. Which phone? Democratic socialism is this. So we talked about socialism and how the government owns everything and can do anything that they want to do. But in democratic socialism, citizens have basic rights. Citizens have things that they have the right to do, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, blah, blah, blah. But other than those things, other than the guaranteed rights you have as a citizen, the government controls everything again. All right? And here's what's unique about democratic socialism. While the government does own the basic needs of production, and they make all the laws, and they make all the rules and regulations, and they own all the property, you get to vote for them. So basically, you are surrendering all of your political power when you go and vote. And then those people together, collectively, have all of this power, but they have to answer to you. So ultimately, the people do own the power because they elect the persons who are in charge of the socialist government. Does that make sense? So democratic socialism is power with people. It is a democracy, but it is socialism. So when you think socialism, you don't have to think Russia or China. It can exist in other places, democracies like Norway and Denmark and Sweden, right? The speed skating states or the winter sports states, right? So the states that do very well, countries that do very well in the Winter Olympics. These places typically have the democratic socialist governments. All right? So it can exist both ways. Yes?
This might be a little off-topic question, but every time we talk about governments and stuff, not all different. Or it was, you know, they say the United States is free and stuff, but just the way you talk about our government doesn't seem like we're that free. You know what I mean?
We're pretty free.
I mean, but like, are there any other countries that are like
that are as free as we are?
Kind
really.
of. I mean,
Not really.
no. Okay, I just thought I'd ask.
We're the most capitalist place in the world, which probably makes us the freest place in the world.
Just thought I'd throw that out.
All right.
I need some help.
I can't see. Oh,
Hey, you need to stop writing on paper. You're wasting your time.
I don't like typing. It's hard.
Get over it and learn how to do it.
I should be able to do things without how to type them or write them.
That's incorrect.
No.
Scientifically speaking, typing them is you retain as much information as if you write it. Then cry quietly because you're interrupting me. All right? Communism. Very different from what you think communism is. Let's begin talking about Karl Marx. Have you ever heard of Karl Marx before, or Marxism? All right, I'm sure you've heard of it before in some way. Karl Marx published his ideas for communism in 1848, called the Communist Manifesto. The Communist Manifesto. So remember I told you about Adam Smith? He wrote The Wealth of Nations, and that was the basis of how to be a capitalist state. The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx is how to be a communist state. It's the opposite, right? So Karl Marx, Communist Manifesto for communism. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations for capitalism. He is not. He's not the one who made manifesto. Right? Here's the difference. Karl Marx advocated for violent revolution because he believed that the world had evolved into a place where there are two groups of people. There are the people with the money, and there are the people who are oppressed. All right? So these are words separated into the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Now, if you type this word exactly as it's written on this board, it's going to tell you it's wrong. All right? That's because this is a French word, and I use the female pronoun because I think it's unfair to always use male pronouns. So that's the female pronoun. So that's bourgeoisie in the female sense. All right? But they are separated into the bourgeoisie, which are the people with the money, the business owners, and the proletariat, the people who work and never own anything. But what he thought is that these caste systems were predetermined. Meaning, if you were in the proletariat, you could never become a part of the bourgeoisie. And if you were in the bourgeoisie, you never went to the proletariat. All right? And it was basically us against them. But here's where it gets a little, I don't know, darker, I guess. He believed that because the bourgeoisie would own everything, and they would just tell the proletariat what to do, that the wages would never rise above subsistence level, which basically means the bourgeoisie, the owners, would never pay the proletariat more than they could pay them, right? So if you walk into a room and say, hey, I'll give you $10 an hour, and there's 100 people in there, and you need 5 workers, 95 of them say no, and 5 of them say yes, you're going to pay $10 an hour to those 5 people, right? But if all of them say no, you'll say, oh, I'll give you $10.50, and then maybe you get 5 people. They're basically going to pay you as little as possible to do as much as they can get you to do. Does that make sense? That's what Karl Marx believed was happening in this caste system. The very wealthy were going to pay as little as possible for the workers so that they could make as much as they possibly could. And he believed that the owners, the people, would get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. All right? So I'm going to give you a little piece of information that may or may not shock you. I don't know. All right? I have no idea. Some of you may know this information. How many of you know who Rupert Murdoch is? Rupert Murdoch. All right, I'm going to show you something I think is cool. If you don't like it, we're still going to look at it. All right? So, let's check it out. Open it and so, this is a visual representation of all of the media outlets in the world. So let me tell you a few things. You think there are a lot of places for you to watch TV, correct? A lot of different networks and a lot of different things. Guess what? 5.
Time Warner is no longer Time Warner.
Correct. They are technically still the Time Warner Corporation. Their name is just Spectrum on your bill. All right? So take a look at this. This is the exact principle that Karl Marx was talking about. 30 years ago, there were 11. 50 years ago, there were almost 40 different television networks and companies. We're now down to 5. So what's happening is this. Viacom used to be a separate company, but CBS wanted to get bigger. So the big bourgeoisie people of Viacom said, all right, we'll retire, sell it to CBS. So the number of bourgeoisie shrunk. So less people are holding more money now. Same thing happened when Disney bought ESPN. ESPN was a corporation. People running ESPN sold to Disney, and the number of bourgeoisie shrunk again. Right? So CBS owns Showtime and your Viacom channels, which are MTV, VH1, Comedy Central, Country Music. That's right, BET, MTV, and Country Music Television, all owned by the same people. Spike TV as well, VH1 in addition to that. All right, we'll talk about it. And then CBS also owns CBS Sports, CBS News, and CBS has the broadcasting rights of the CW. Spectrum has the production rights. So Spectrum makes the content, CBS is responsible for airing it, which is why it's in the middle here. All right, Spectrum owns HBO, TNT, TBS, True TV, Adult Swim, Turner Classic Movies, Cartoon Network, the WB, all of those same people. Have you ever wondered why you saw commercials for TNT on TBS, for TNT shows? It's because they're owned by the same people. They don't care which channel you watch. They're going to make money either way. Right? Disney owns a lot of stuff. So Disney has purchased ABC. ABC owns ABC Family, which is now called Freeform. Yes, so Disney owns Freeform. Disney also owns all the ABC channels. They own ESPN and all the ESPN channels. Disney also owns A&E and Hearst. Because ESPN controls Hearst, and because Disney controls A&E, with broadcast on A&E, NBC also has some rights to A&E. Mainly, it's just some recast of 60 Minutes, and that's it. All right? And then NBC has some of your favorites, USA, Sci-Fi, MSNBC, and Hulu is owned by NBC. Hulu is not its own company. Pretty awesome, right?
Is Netflix its own company?
Netflix is its own company. It is the only example of its own company that is left.
No, really.
That's it.
It doesn't get Discovery.
Discovery Channel is owned by the Travel Channel.
Investigation Discovery. The Murder Channel.
I don't know what that is. I don't have cable. I don't use cable. I don't.
Well,
Cable's for chumps. Cable's for like baby boomers and 40-year-olds. Nobody watches cable anymore.
Do you
It's not a
watch
thing.
Criminal Minds?
I don't watch anything that's on cable TV.
Criminal Minds is on Netflix.
Criminal Minds is on cable TV, but the reruns are on Netflix.
Yeah.
But no, I've never watched it.
Oh my god, it's funny.
Yeah. All right, so then there is one here, AMC. This is probably the only example of a super small company that still owns some other. So like AMC used to be tiny, and the only reason they didn't sell to Disney was because of Breaking Bad. That was it.
Go Breaking Bad.
They premiered Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad tripled their profits in a year, and it 10 times them in 5 years.
Yeah.
And then that gave them enough money to produce another show that has 10 times their profits again.
Oh yeah.
The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead. That is the only way that AMC has been able to make money and stay afloat. They also own WeTV, that's Women's Entertainment, Sundance, and the IFC. Do you have your question, Pearson?
No, you kind of took it from us, but I asked, I was like, why aren't there dotted lines going to AMC? And then you said that. I was like, that's why I smacked my head on the desk.
This is a weird one. It's called Liberty Mutual or Liberty International. You may have heard them because they're also a bank. Owned Stars, Encore, and Movieplex. Tiffany.
So let's say that like Spectrum plays all of these for them. So how much money goes to the company?
To Spectrum itself?
Oh my god. Yeah.
Most of the time, companies don't make any money because that allows them to not pay any taxes. So they spend all of their money making new investments so that they actually lose money so that they don't have to pay any taxes. But technically, they make a lot of money, hundreds of millions, sometimes billions. All right, pretty cool. So there you go. If you didn't know, basically 5 corporations own the world. They own everything that you digest. except for Netflix.
So who was Rupert Murdoch?
Rupert Murdoch owns 2 of those companies. He owns, Fox News. He owns Fox. And he owns the Wall Street Journal, I believe. And he also owns, used to own a piece of ABC, and then he sold it to Disney. So I guess he only owns 1 now. Big move. He made like $1.3 billion. But yeah. All right. So basically what that means is Marx thought that those huge companies would continue to sell their companies only to other people who own huge companies, which would cause that bourgeoisie group to shrink and shrink and shrink to where we are now, where 99% of the world's wealth is held by 1% of the population. Does that make sense? So 99% of all the money that exists in the entire world is in the hands of 1% of the world's population.
That's crazy.
Crazy. How much money do you need to make to be a part of the 1%?
A lot.
435,000.
That's me. I have money.
That's it.
The government owns me.
The government owns you?
Yeah, so I'm impossible.
That's not correct. That's not, you can think about it that way if it makes you feel better, but that's not technically how it
My
works.
state is DG, what does that mean?
Right?
Yeah. Oh.
All right. Mercedes, go ahead.
The French term for it?
Yeah, bourgeoisie and proletariat.
You can't do that.
Do what?
You just basically made that word plural.
What word?
Bourgeoisie. You just made it plural. I took 2 years of French. If the word, you can't change feminine and masculine. That means you just made it plural, right? That's a plural word.
Anyway,
But it's also the female version of it.
I know, that's why it's plural. Usually the
So,
feminine version of
No
French word
S
means.
is a male version.
Yes, I know. I took 2 years of French. That means you just made that plural.
Check it out. I'm gonna show you something real quick. Bourgeoisie is the high class business owners. Proletariat are the working class low people. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
All right. So,
Give me what it is.
how many of you know what this word is?
That's my name. Pronounce. Beyonce. I can't read that.
That's fiance.
That's my name.
Guess what word this is?
My
He's
name.
about to pull. There are very few words in the French language that can't do that.
That is also fiance. This is if the person being referenced is a male.
Spell Beyonce.
This is if the person being referenced is a female.
How do you say Beyonce in male?
Fiance is a pronoun, so I don't know. So, fiance with 1 E is a male. Fiance with 2 E's is a female. So, Pearson, it's female plural.
Oh, I know that.
Because I'm referring to a group of people. Yes. Thanks, I appreciate it. Marx continued by stating that he believed this would cause the proletariat eventually to get tired of the crap, to get tired of never having access to any wealth, to get tired of never having the ability to make their own money and their own lives and their own decisions, and just continually run in a hamster wheel until they die. And they would revolt against the rich. They would revolt against the bourgeoisie, overthrow them, and take over. That was at least the goal of Karl Marx. All right? But what Karl Marx truly believed is that under communism, there would only be one class. Everybody would be exactly the same. Remember, this is what you thought. This is a piece of communism that is part of the Russian thing that everybody thinks. Russia doesn't care about this. Russia wants the government to be in control of everything. They don't care if you're equal or not. Communism is a true equality type of place where everybody would be exactly the same. Property, nobody would hold. You wouldn't be able to own property at all. Nobody would. It would just be property. And if you needed to use it and it's there, you use it. It's like a community property, which is where the word communism comes from. It's where you basically exist as a community. And if you need it, fine. All right? And there would be no need for government. Why? Because if you live like a community, there's no need for government and there's no need for money. Right? As a community, you would come together and say, hey, you've got some good land that you're living on to farm stuff. You want to farm stuff? Sure. So they would farm and bring food. And then they would make sure that food was available to everybody that was in their community. And there would be somebody who would be practicing of medicine or a physician of some kind that would say, hey, I'm going to practice medicine. And they wouldn't charge anybody anything because everybody would just survive and exist living in a community. There'd be no wages, there'd be no need for government because you would all count on each other to survive. Somebody would be an educator. Somebody would be a stonemason. Somebody would be a welder. Somebody would fix cars. Somebody would build houses, whatever. But they wouldn't charge anybody for anything because it would be for the betterment of the community as a whole. Does that make sense? So communism isn't the government taking control. Communism is the need for government not to exist anymore because everybody sort of gets along on their own. Right?
That's great.
Very idealistic. Very idealistic. So the community would decide how much and what to produce. So the community decides how much and what to produce because that's based on their needs. How it would be produced is up to the individual who is responsible for it. And who gets that good or service is everyone. Everyone who wants it. Remember I said when we were talking about capitalism, it's everyone who can pay for it. In communism, the who gets it is anyone who wants it.
So I can welcome somebody and take like their belongings and be like, nope, that's mine. It's everyone's.
That is not even close to what we're talking about.
That's what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that goods or services exist, and you would say, hey, I need this. And they would say, okay, here you go. You're not taking anything because you don't own anything. Everybody owns everything.
So if I walk up to Brooklyn Master Computer right now and I'm in the communist area, what do we just go, nope, it's mine, sorry. You're not getting it.
You're not understanding the purpose.
You don't own it.
You don't own the computer. So here, Jada, here's what would happen. Everybody has a computer and you don't. And you go to the person who produces computers and say, hey, I need a computer. They would say, sure, here's a computer. You wouldn't need to steal it. Yes. For no money.
I'm moving there.
Money wouldn't exist in this entire system because there'd be no need for it. Everybody, listen, everybody just performs good or services for their neighbors, for people around them, because those people are in turn going to perform good and or services for you. There would be no need for money because you would have everything you could possibly need without needing money, without needing government. So you wouldn't need to steal anything because if somebody produced it, you would just say, hey, can I have some? Sure, here you go.
Okay.
Right? Not Canada. There are no communist governments in existence.
Man, can I become my president?
There are no communist governments in existence. There have been attempts, and all attempts have ended in revolt and revolution and civil war. All right? So communism is a very idealistic, happy skipping type of place.
Why do people refer to each other as communists?
Because they actually mean socialist and haven't been educated enough to know the difference. But now you have. All right, I'm sorry. Say your question.
I was playing history last year, and someone was a communist, and you had to yes. They had a lie. And we got little groups and like, no, I'm not a communist. You're a communist.
Socialist, but yes. If the game had been called "Who's the Socialist," it's not. So why would a communist need to invade anywhere? They don't care.
No, it was like they were.
I get that. I do.
He was teaching us about how people were using other people being communists.
Hold on. That's the end of the recording.